सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
I'm recording this episode of Cut the Clutter several hours before the Quad meeting actually takes place. The Quad summit actually takes place. And chances are by the time you see it, you'd be hearing quite a bit of buzz coming out of the Quad summit between the leaders of US, India, Japan, and Australia. So let me not talk about that because I can't. I don't know what's going to be the outcome, but I know about something that is quite cluttered and quite complex, and that it is likely that you will not hear about very much at the end of this summit in joint statements, or may not even hear about it at all, because it will be camouflaged. Chances are it will be camouflaged in something else, something more generic, which also I will tell you. So I'm talking about something called rare earths. So what is this rare earth business? If you are my generation, or frankly, if you are any generation, you might think Rare Earth is the name of a rock band, because I think this is one of the longest lasting rock bands in the world from 1960, formed in 1960, and is still going on. Its cast of characters keeps changing. The players in the band keep changing. So my generation remembers something that every generation remembers, which is Get Ready from Rare Earth. So this is not that rare earth. We are talking about real rare earths. So what are rare earths? Rare earths, or some people also use the expression rare metals. These are 17 chemically related minerals. 17 chemically related. They are not rare because very little of these is found in the earth, in the world. Quite a bit of these is found. Quite a bit of the ores containing these is found. But in those ores, the element of these metals or these minerals is very tiny, very minuscule. And it's very difficult to refine them and take that little bit out. That's why these are called rare earths. Now, why are rare earths important? Rare earths are important because without rare earths, and don't ask me how did we get here, how did scientists discover these special properties of these metals, I will explain to you what they do. Without these, almost all our lives will come to a standstill today. Our phone will not vibrate. Our cell phones, in fact, will not work. In fact, chances are that most of us carry quite a bit of rare earths on our body as we go out to work. Our cars have several kilos of rare earths, particularly if you have electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles. Our airplanes, even passenger planes that we fly, armed forces, missiles, radars, sonars, guiding mechanisms for missiles, everything works, everything needs one of these rare metals. So I will tell you a little bit more about this. The question here is that China over time has acquired a global domination of these rare earths. So there was a situation until about 10 years back when China controlled 90%, 90. China produced 90% of the world's rare earth needs. Today, it's come down to 60% because some countries really got hassled and they work on it. And these countries, mark my words, these countries were Japan, Australia, and the US. Now, India is a part of it. Now, first of all, what are the rare earths? These are the 17 metals or 17 minerals. So if I may read out a list of these 17 to you or introduce you to these 17, frankly, these sound like names of some Roman villages in an Asterix comics. So these are not necessarily in any order, neither alphabetical nor order of importance, because I don't know the order of importance, but I know the one that is the most wanted, most needed in the world right now. And that is neodymium. So we put neodymium in front. And then there is lanthanum, cerium, praseodymium. I know that these are tongue twisters, so you will see spellings on my screen. Lanthanum, cerium, praseodymium, promethium, samarium, europium, gadolinium, terbium, dysprosium, holmium, serbium, thulium, ytterbium, lutetium. Didn't I say these sound like some Roman villages in an Asterix comics? Scandinium, yttrium. So there are these 17. Why did I say that neodymium is the most important right now? Because today the world is moving towards electric vehicles. Electric vehicles cannot work without neodymium. In fact, a combination of neodymium and lithium, which is not also found in many places. In fact, Bolivia has a lot of the world's lithium, and that's why Bolivia has become so important. And that's the reason China has struck such deep roots in Bolivia as well. Nevertheless, let's not go to lithium today. So electric vehicles, all our telecommunication, all our other sophisticated communication, our satellites, our missiles, nothing can work without neodymium. That is an essential component. Our cell phones can't function, our headphones can't function, most of our cars can't function, the planes can't fly, fighter planes definitely can't fly. Stealth planes have no life at all if they don't get neodymium and other rare earths also. So I have a quote, a line from an article that I read, and that in fact two brilliant young people, Tenzin Zompa and Riti Agrawal, found for me on cnbc.com from Adam Isaac. It's a 2018 article. I like this line. It says that without neodymium, an iPhone can't vibrate. Your AirPods will not be able to play. Music, all hi-fi systems will come to a standstill. Wind turbines will not work. And electric vehicles will not work. Why? Because for all of these to work, a motor has to spin. Something has to spin. Now, if you know basic engineering, and all of us who've driven an old vehicle has opened something or looked under the bonnet or looked inside something in our two-wheelers also. And you know that a magnet always plays a crucial role in every machinery. That magnet continues to be charged, and if the charge goes down, then the magnet loses charge. I'm making it very simple for you. What these rare metals do is they help you create a special type of magnets, which might be called rare earth permanent magnets or rare element permanent magnets, REPMs. How these work, let me tell you in as simple a manner as possible. So if you take iron, you can make a magnet with it. But if you combine iron with boron, which means, so it's like tossing up a cocktail. You take iron as your main alcoholic beverage, add boron to it, that's your basic cocktail, and then top it up with a garnish of neodymium. When you do that, then this iron mixed with boron and topped with the garnish of neodymium, imagine it like a cocktail. This gives you the most powerful permanent magnets ever created by humankind. So these are very powerful magnets. These are also permanent magnets. They don't need constant charging. Again, I am oversimplifying it, but the engineers among you, in any case, know this. The rest hopefully can understand this without getting too cluttered. So this is why this is needed. And the other elements also, again, if I look at the CSIS paper, which is quite detailed, and I'm sharing it with you, you will find that many of the others also have their own crucial uses. For example, if you look at europium, you might not have heard of it until now or seen it or heard about it being sold, but europium is crucial to all targeting mechanisms in weapon systems. Without this weapon systems, your beyond visual range stuff will be history or will be fantasy. It cannot happen. Terbium, again something we don't hear very much about. Terbium, yttrium, europium, all three are crucial to targeting systems, targeting mechanisms in all weapon systems. Of course, europium is also very important for electronics and other things, and so are other people. Now, if you want to see how crucial these are to things that we use on a daily basis. So a Toyota Prius, for example, which is a hybrid, the Toyota Prius carries about 10 to 15 kilos of rare earths. Then you also, all our solid state electronic devices, our sonars, radars, TV screens, they need lanthanum and terbium as well. So all these are crucial. Now China has a near monopoly in this. How did that monopoly happen? China does not have a monopoly of the world's rare earth deposits. China has about 44% of the world's rare earth deposits. But how does China have this monopoly? Now, again, if you look at who has how many rare earths, so I will again give you an example. China has 44 million tons. Sorry, I was wrong to say 44%. It has 44 million tons. And that is 36.7% of the global rare earth deposits. In comparison, Brazil has 22%, Vietnam has 18%, Russia has 10%, or India has 5.8%, which is not bad at all. And thereby lies a story that I will tell you. India is 5.8%, and the rest of the world, including America and Japan, have 10.9%. So India has more rare earth deposits than Australia or America. In fact, if we look carefully, more than Australia and America combined. So that's why I said thereby hangs a tale, to which I will come a little bit later. Now, then why does China have such a monopoly? Because I told you early on that rare earths are rare, not because they are rarely found, but because they are very difficult to mineralize, they're very difficult to refine. So you might get huge amount of ore from which you will get a little bit of rare earth. To do that, the processes you use are environmentally highly destructive. These are the most highly destructive processes environmentally when it comes to mineral extraction. And then what it does is, to make it worse, these processes produce a lot of radioactive waste. That radioactive waste has to go somewhere. Now, increasingly, countries around the world have gone away from refining metals like these. China had lax environmental laws, plus China has endless expanses of desert and areas where nobody lives. So China deliberately and institutionally made its environmental laws on these refineries lax. So China could pollute as no one else could. So the whole world, even those who mine these minerals, started sending these to China for processing. If you look at America, for example, America has been sending all its rare minerals, rare earths mined in America to China to process. And it buys 80% of it back from China. So basically, it's giving its own stuff to China. It's very much like the old third world colonies of the past, where they exported raw material to the big man, who then converted that into finished product and sold it back to you. So China has been able to able to leverage its lax environmental laws by way of an indirect ecological subsidy in the rare metal industry. Now we have data from US Geological Survey, which is quite telling. And I told you that US exports all its rare earth minerals mined in America to China and imports 80% of it back to avoid pollution that processing will cause in America. Now, I told you there was a time until 2010 when China controlled about 90% of the world's rare earth markets. That has now come down to 60%. How has that happened? How did a turning point come? I will tell you. The turning point came because the world suddenly realized something happened in 2010, and then the world realized that China now had this crippling monopoly where it could punish any country by way of just controlling the supply of rare earths to it. So what happened in 2010 was that Senkaku Islands that we keep talking about all the time, those are the Japanese islands that China lays claims to. A Chinese fishing vessel was caught close to Senkaku Islands, and the Japanese commander of the Japanese vessel, he dared to arrest the captain of the Chinese fishing boat. What they were fishing for, your guess is as good as mine. So they arrested that captain of the Chinese fishing boat. In retaliation, China stopped the supply of rare earths to Japan. When that happened, Japan went down on its knees. Within 2 months, Japan was down on its knees. and was suing for peace. When that happened, then the whole world figured out that there is a problem. Japanese sent a delegation there. That delegation met Li Keqiang then. Li Keqiang then said, oh, we are willing to cooperate, but you shift your downstream production to China. So China used this as an instrument also, besides getting its own strategic objectives met, say on Senkaku, in terms of using it as a deterrent against Japan. It also used this power as a strategic weapon against Japan, America, Australia, to say that you want rare metals for certain crucial manufacturing, shift your manufacturing to our country. So that was one way of making the whole world buy made in China, hi-fi, and made in China, high-tech products. That is what the world became alive to, and then they began responding to it. So the first response came between Japan and Australia, because Australia has a bunch of rare earths, not as much as India, but it has a bunch of rare earths, plus a lot of Australia is empty. So two Japanese company, Sojitz Corporation, and a public sector company, a government company, Japan Oil, Gas and Metals National Group, that is JOGMEC, they invested $250 million in an Australian mining company called Lynas Corporation. That then started fulfilling some of Japan's needs, and that's what led to Japan. 1/3 of Japan's needs are now met by this company, and that's how Japan reduced its dependence on China, but it has only reduced it. And do you know how massive China's control over these were? That in 2010, when they imposed restrictions on the exports of rare metals, the price of rare metals jumped 9 times. Now, 10 years later, in 2020, we can see that Xi Jinping is still conscious of this advantage. Because one thing the Chinese do, they think in the long term. So Xi Jinping actually goes to a rare earth processing facility in 2019 in Jiangxi province, and again gives a speech there saying how brilliant you are. So everybody knows why has he gone to this processing facility. And People's Daily then carries an article which basically suggests that this is the way the Chinese will respond to Donald Trump's trade war on them, by once again squeezing America and the rest of the world on rare metals. So we know this from a Wall Street Journal article, which also I am sharing with you. Now, this is the time when the Chinese revised their own tariffs on the rare earth mineral they were importing from America. So they were imposing a tariff, so earning money, then they were processing it. When they were selling it back, they were adding the cost of these tariffs, so they were making double profits. So America didn't know what to do, and this, in fact, it seems, forced America's hand on imposing more tariffs on Chinese goods, because they also realized that Chinese control this lever and they can't risk losing their rare earth supply. Because you know what? If you see an F-35 stealth aircraft, an F-35 stealth aircraft has 427 kilograms of rare earths, most of which come from China. If you see a Virginia-class nuclear submarine, these are the mainstays of American armed forces. A Virginia-class nuclear submarine has 4.2 tons of rare earths, most of which come from China. So the Chinese let them know who the boss is. So 2008 to 18, because the Japanese woke up to this, they reduced their dependence on China from 91.3% to about 58 to 60%. Whereas the US now is still at 80.5%. And that is why at the Quad, when these 4 countries talk, one of the things they'll talk about is, I know this might be camouflaged in something called strategic technologies or strategic manufacturing and things like that. But at the heart of that will be rare metals, because there are ideas, can these countries combine resources for more research to find technologies for safer processing of these minerals, environmentally safer, or for mining, or they can do something else to reduce this dependence, because this has now become a big problematic thing. Now, I told you when I mentioned to you that India has more of these metals than America and Australia, and probably more than them together. See how much does India mine out of this. US in 2020, which has a fraction of what India has, mined 38,000 tons of these minerals. And these, then they exported to China to be processed. It's like in old days, India exported cotton to Manchester. It came back as machine-made cloth. And then Gandhi said that we will fight it and destroy British Manchester's cloth mills by spinning our own yarn and by weaving our own cloth, right? So this is something like that happening to America. So they mined 38,000 tons. India, which has much more of the ore than America, only mined 3,000 tons. Why did it happen? There is a bunch of factors which we'll talk about in the course of time. There are serious issues with India's mining. Australia, again, which has much less than India, mined 17,000 tons. And China has a lot more than India. China has about 7 times or 6 times more than India, but China mined 140,000 tons. 140,000 tons. So 140,000 tons and 3,000 tons. You are 2%. And at which point, I will also tell you, once again, we have some data from US Geological Survey website. In 2020, US had 16% of the world's production of these rare earths. Australia had 7%. I gave you the tonnage. Now I'm giving you percentages. India had just 1%. Now, why does India do so badly? And I will tell you, because I had said earlier, thereby hangs a tail. So the tail is, I think it goes back to sometime in 2011, where a big media baron of the world, I will not mention the name because I don't recall if this was meant to be an off-record conversation or was to be just a casual conversation that you could quote tomorrow. But this is a well-known media baron, and you can guess who it is, who, as some of these foreigners do when they call people for dinner, large number of people for dinner, foreign CEOs do it. After dinner at dessert time, they go from table to table to talk to each group. And when he came to our table, we were talking about China because he knows China very well. And I asked him some question about China, and he said, look at the Chinese. This world now runs on rare metals. He used the word rare metals. The world runs on rare metals. China controls 90% of the world's supplies. The Japanese acted funny once by arresting some Chinese fishing vessel captain, and Chinese throttled them and Japanese were down on their knees. This is that media baron's line. The Chinese went down on their knees because Sony, Panasonic, everybody went begging before their government saying, do something about this. And something was done, and Toyota, etc., etc. Now, he said that your country, India, has quite a bit of these rare metals. In fact, after China and Brazil, your country might have probably the largest availability of these rare metals. And if you're not able to mine even 1% of it, and you think it's because of your Maoists and activists, and you think the Chinese have nothing to do with it, then you live in cloud cuckoo land. So I have no way yet of confirming it with data on the ground, except to say that data tells us that India can mine only a very tiny fraction of the rare earths it has, although India has a public sector company dedicated to this task, Indian Rare Earths Limited. Now, the Chinese had seen this very early on. In fact, there is a speech of January 1992 that Deng Xiaoping delivered, where he said, the Middle East has its oil, China has rare earths in 1992. So that is how minerals, that is how your natural wealth matters, because you have to see your natural wealth either a strategic asset going ahead or the lack of a natural wealth or natural asset as a strategic liability. For Japan, it's a big strategic liability. China used it as a strategic asset very early on. India, on the other hand, for various reasons, were not able to use it. And that needs to be corrected now. And I think you will see some movement in that direction once this Quad process moves on. Now you might say, what else can be done? And what else can the Quad do when it's so difficult to find these minerals? Now the answer lies in the fact that the Quad is about Indo-Pacific. Indo is the Indian Ocean region. Now, when sun beats down on a region for forever, for millennia, and also many other natural elements act, then gravitational forces get concentrated. How that happens, please ask your physics teacher. Those gravitational forces get locked up in the rocks and sand. That is what leads to the creation of what is called as mineral sands. So Indian Ocean region is very rich in mineral sands, including India's coastline, India's islands. These mineral sands, then you mine, and a lot of these mineral sands are mined. From these mineral sands, a lot of other metals are taken out. They are crucial to our paints, to our abrasives, to many other things of normal industrial use. But these also yield small amounts of rare metals. So looking at the future, one way of producing these rare metals without having very high costs is if they become byproducts of other larger minerals. So if you mine more of these mineral sands, they're blackish sands, you find lots of them in Kerala. If you mine more of these mineral sands, and you produce other minerals which are produced in much larger quantities and have technologies whereby little bits of rare metals can be produced, then your cost can come down, your environmental implications can also be controlled greatly. And that is what is being done right now. So if rare metals become a byproduct of other minerals, that is a big step forward, and that is where we are headed now. Now, I told you that the Chinese look at their strategic picture 30 years ahead. So what has China been doing lately? China has been going aggressively and buying mineral sand mining concessions in Indian Ocean countries. So it's not just India, it is Tanzania, it's Madagascar, also Australia. All these countries have a lot of these sands. So time has now come for these countries to get together and protect it. So speaking to the CII in June of last year, Prime Minister Modi probably was referring to some of this when he addressing this private industry, when he said that private sector should also become a partner in strategic industries and nuclear technologies. I would presume there was a reference to rare metals there. So as I conclude this fascinating subject for today, and watch what comes out of the Quad meeting and see between the lines, you will find these rare earths, because that is the world's great concern about China now, because China can bring any other industrial economy or tech economy to a standstill given its control over this supply chain. So when you hear about, security of supply chain, then you know that this is one of the things being considered. Now you want to understand this better, also in terms of what can the rest of the world do to fight China's monopoly or to balance China's monopoly. I'm also sharing an article with you by Anuradha Kanisetti in Business Insider. So please read that as well. In fact, I'll share you with one more article from a New Zealand publication that tells us that it's not just the Quad, but also the Five Eyes Alliance. Two members are common to both Quad and Five Eyes, that is the US and Australia, but Five Eyes, the other three are New Zealand, Britain and Canada. That Five Eyes Alliance is also seized of this issue of rare earths.